No, that's good. Hey, everybody, it's Renee Cormier from the Fractional Referral Network. Today on our call is Dan Gibson. Dan is a fractional sales leader with over 25 years experience in the medical tech industry. That comes with some unique challenges, and we're going to talk today about whether or not fractional sales leaders are nuts. Like, what are they? And are they really crazy? I don't know. Dan, welcome aboard. Thank you very much for coming.
It's always a pleasure, Renee. And the title, I mean, the title is it was deliberately chosen because, anytime that I tell somebody that I'm in that sales function, they say to me, "Are you nuts? Like, why are you doing that?" Because it sometimes can be so ill-defined and sometimes stigmatized too, as to other business functions and that we're familiar with. And it can be an interesting yet provocative place to work.
Okay, very good. So, how would you describe a fractional sales executive's role in broad terms?
Broad terms. So let's take it from the point of sales. Sales in general, I had a great boss when I started out. His name was Mark Hollingsworth, and he used to say that sales is about making and managing fire, which is an analogy that I always loved because he felt that sales was the light and the heat and the energy that drove a lot of the business and made it successful. And then in terms of I would say a fractional sales executive is that our job is to come in and really assess how much fire there is. Are they smoldering away? Are they at a position where they're ready to die out? And helping them really build up that fire at a controlled rate so it grows, so that there's momentum, but that it doesn't burn out, that it's not, let's say, overfed to the point where they can't meet obligations and grow in an optimal yet controlled fashion. Because that's one of the big problems in sales is that you need to grow properly. You need to generate sales that you can deliver on. You need to generate sales that people will talk about.
Yes, yes, and the lifeblood of your organization is sales. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business. So the sales team supports all of the employees. It always amazes me how people in an organization can, always have so much hate and contempt for their salespeople.
There's you
Because
abs
without them, they've got nothing. They don't have jobs.
No, you're absolutely right. And I've had those conversations. I know I remember in some of the companies that I work for is that there is this love-hate relationship that occurs with sales, right? On one hand, you're demonized, and on the other hand,
Yes.
you're lionized, depending on what you do. You win a big contract and you get the high five. You miss a tender or an RFP, and they say, "How did you screw that up?" And the other thing that you would also hear was, you know, um, you're the sales guy, go out and sell that product. You figure it out, which is
Yeah.
fair in some ways.
So, which brings me to my next question. What sales problems does a fractional sales executive actually solve?
Yeah, so I'm going to use it depends, right? It depends on a specific situation, but when a fractional sales executive comes in, I mean, obviously they're being expected to apply the experience and the expertise that they've accumulated over a lengthy career, which could be, it could be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What problems can a fractional sales executive address? I'm going to use the analogy of a house, if that's
Okay.
okay. So first of all, when you think about the analogy of a house, there is the foundational concepts, right? There's a foundation, there's studs in the walls, there's a roof, there's a paved driveway. These are the things that a customer takes for granted that are there, right? That's the infrastructure that has to be
Hmm.
in place. And a customer really shouldn't see those things. They should just assume that we're doing it and we're doing it properly. But there has to be a purposeful development of that infrastructure for things to even begin. So a fractional sales executive could start with that foundation and creating an infrastructure, which could include CRM, hiring parameters for actually the salespeople, helping to create a compensation structure that attracts and retains talent, and really looking at, I would say some of those behind the scenes situations that a customer never should see. So that's the infrastructure. But then the next level down is really the processes, the tactical execution, right? If you were to use the house analogy again, that's the plumbing, that's the electrical, that's the Wi-Fi. Those are things that are supposed to work, right? Again,
Yep.
customers may take them for granted, but they're supposed to work. And these are, these are the things like um, really about funnel management, making sure that the processes that salespeople use are predictable, consistent, and that you actually have some sort of deliberate way of following leads through the funnel and actually closing them. So that's let's call that those sales processes. Let's call them the plumbing and the electrical. And then the last analogy of the house is really the behaviors and the skills. That is where you actually touch the customer, where you interface with them. And those are the ones that are the most noticeable. If you were to think about a house, that's the hardwood floors. Those are the nice fixtures and the nice glass cabinet in the shower, the air conditioner, the HVAC. But that's where the customer gets touched emotionally in those experiences. So if you're a sales executive, from a fractional perspective, you can start at the top with the infrastructure and build that. You can clean up the processes so that leads move through it properly and that you close and that you don't have, fallout. And lastly, you really can drill down to the level of people and making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do and that they're being consistent in their behavior and following the plan.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think what happens a lot in sales among sales teams is that they get a little comfortable and they stop following the plan, right? They stop doing what works and inevitably their sales plummet. And then they go, shoot, I should have gone back and, get back to the basics, right? I always see that in sales.
And there's a lot of different personalities out there, right, Renee? Like, and you've seen this
Yes.
too, is that when you look at a sales team, I can guarantee you, you'll walk your way through that. You'll see the lone wolf, you'll see the challenger, you'll see the pleaser. There'll be all these different people that have different personalities and they tick in a different way. But the bottom line is all these people do have to follow the same processes and plan
Yeah.
that are in alignment with what the company's trying to do and the problems they're trying to solve.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And they're not meant to constrain you, but rather to help you be
Guide you.
successful.
Yeah.
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 It's strictly navigation. It's GPS for the sales function, right?
Yes. Yeah. And everybody needs it. And this is something that doesn't matter what your business is, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, sales is sales, right? The process and the psychology behind all of it is relevant, whether it's B2B, B2C, tech, small business, a garden center, it doesn't matter what it is. Like it's all it's all basically the same kind of interaction that you have to have.
And fundamental behaviors, right?
Yes, fundamental behaviors.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So what kinds of companies could a fractional sales leader help? Like where would that sweet spot be?
The types of companies that a fractional sales leader could help. I would say there's about three, and one of them is going to be contentious to you, but I'm going to go there eventually. The first group is really the growing company, the scaling company that has been successful. They've got a great product or solution or service that has gotten traction and does solve a problem and has some patency associated with it. But they are likely the sales function within that company is likely founder led. And that founder led or that type of sales process, they really struggle because it's not really their main wheelhouse. They fell into the role. They really are interested in building and designing and solving the problem, but the selling aspect is something they fell into. So for a company that's growing and scaling quickly, somebody like us, we're really indispensable because we can come in, we know how to do this. We can take that off of the founder's plate so they can get back to what they should be doing, and that is building a forward-facing strategy to make sure that they're preparing for the future. So there's that growing company. Another type of company where a fractional can have a big impact is a changing company. And we see this. There's companies where they've reached some sort of inflection point. They've had a senior sales leader move on, or maybe they've had to let go of a senior sales leader because they weren't getting the job done. And while they're in a sort of I would say a process of learning who they need and what they want to do, somebody like us comes in to essentially pinch hit and fill that gap and make sure that they don't falter because there are processes in place that they're trying to follow through on. and there are leads and clients that have to be taken care of and closed to, to generate that revenue. So those transitional companies that have faced some sort of a hiccup, they're perfect.
Right.
And the understanding is that we are coming in for a limited engagement. Let's call it that. It's like the Ed Mervis Theater, only here for this long.
Yes,
It's,
yes.
but it's important because it buys them breathing space, where they can actually reflect and do a bit of a postmortem on where they were with their sales function. Say, okay, the last person we had in here, this is what they did or didn't achieve. How do we change that? And then we can help them with discerning those types of attributes as well. So that's the second group. So first group, growing and scaling quickly, founder led, don't have that sales background and need somebody to come in and really let them get back to what they're doing until maybe they can justify bringing in full-time headcount. Second one is transitional. Third one, you're going to disagree with this. So jump in on this.
All right.
I truly believe sometimes we can jump into a pre-revenue company. And I'll tell you why.
Ah.
We've argued about this.
You're
I,
right. Yes.
and I know this is contentious to you, and I have some caveats associated with this. I think that there's an opportunity for fractionals to get involved with these pre-revenue companies, particularly if they feel emotionally strongly about the vision that's going on. And I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody came to me in the Waterloo ecosystem and said, we're working on a pediatric cancer device and we really need some help. And the bell in my head goes off and says, I want to help you. I want to
Yeah.
help you get there. But I think in these situations, to sort of reflect on conversations that you and I have had, there have to be some caveats there. There have to be some limits, right? You have to say,
Yes.
listen, I'm willing to help you to a certain extent. I still have to pay my bills, but I'm willing to help you because I like what you're doing. I like the problem
Yeah.
that you're solving. And what this does, in my opinion, Renee, is sales gets a bad rap, and sometimes we have to elevate our behaviors to get beyond that mercenary type of image that
Yes.
there is with sales. So that's a peripheral type of opportunity for a fractional sales leader, but I think it's there. So those are the three that I'd zero in
I,
on. I don't know. What do you
I,
think?
I'm all for saving children from cancer. And I'm okay, pre-revenue companies, provided they've got some kind of money to pay you. It's okay if you don't have sales yet. That's fine. I'm not a fan, and I don't advocate for anybody to work for equity only,
Sure.
of a company that has no sales and no nothing, because most startups fail, period.
Yeah.
And ultimately, even a great product, the founders will get in a big fight, and then you're left like, maybe you've put in 50 or $100,000 worth of effort, or even if it's 10 or 20, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You put your time and your effort and your good faith into something, and they decide to get in a battle and everything falls to bits.
Sure.
And, so I have a problem with that. You
Yeah.
want to work for a pre-revenue company, get some money out of them first and some equity. And maybe even, if you're capable, if you have connections or whatever to help make connections for people to get funding or to get investors or whatever, that if you can add that to the mix, that's a bonus, because you're solidifying the likelihood that they will have some success. Not that funding always matters, but it helps, right? uh,
Yeah, and you just hit on something really important. I mean, earlier you asked me about the sales problems that a fractional sales leader can solve, and we talked about infrastructure and processes and behaviors. The other problem that we can solve that is it's a bit more peripheral is applying our network,
yeah.
right? Like we have a network, and we have a network for two reasons. We have a network because we've met a lot of people, but we also have a network just because of the vagaries of time. We've been doing it for a long
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
And we can't be too self-congratulatory about that, but we've met a lot of people. And I think that's another problem that we can solve, is that we are connectors and that we have a whole host of different people that we could either advocate for, or we could really sort of can I say, give the stamp of approval on.
Yeah, like, let's say, take the example of the pre-revenue startup with the device for treating cancer and pediatric cancer. Now, in your career in med tech, you must have other companies that you've worked with that might be interested in partnering with them, um, um, licensing their product, or doing something around that to support them. Maybe they'd even buy them out. I mean, who knows? And maybe that's not what the company wants, but there's probably some opportunity for them to collaborate in some way, and Dan Gibson gets paid too, and not just for your own fees, but like referral fees. I mean, the whole thing behind the referral network is to give people another alternative. There's money to be made in referring, and yeah, salespeople know everybody. If you have to cozy up with somebody, cozy up with a sales guy, because they know everybody.
It's very true. It's and the other thing is particularly if a salesperson has been involved in a sort of a matrix sell, a
Yeah,
cross-functional sell, where you've had to walk into a company and you've actually had to sell. You've had to sell the folks in R&D, IT. You've had to sell the folks in the marketing and product development. Like if you have to actually sell multiple sort of decision makers, you're contacting so many different people across that spectrum, and your network just it multiplies exponentially.
yeah. So how could a fractional sales leader interact with other fractional leaders who specialize in other functions in a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, excuse me, I think that when we look at the different functional areas of business, I mean, just to give you some examples, I feel like there's so much overlap. There's so much overlap between the sales function and other pieces of the business where we can be helpful, where we can actually add detail and insight and perspective for different functional areas. When I think of, for instance, HR, all right, the HR, a fractional HR person might be, they might be working within an organization, and a fractional sales leader could come in and help them understand, what types of compensation structures are most, appealing to people in the
Yeah.
sales profession. What should that look like in terms of variable and fixed compensation, in terms of other types of, bonus structures, and like knowing how salespeople think and tick. So
Yes.
that's something, with the HR group, you could work with that. You could help them in terms of developing experiential interview questions in specific areas of expertise. Tell me about a time. And we know the answer in sales because we've been there. The HR person may not have experienced that, but the salesperson might have experienced that exact scenario. Or just helping them define skills and capabilities for salespeople. What does a good salesperson need to do? What does it say in the empirical evidence, but also from practical common sense and what you've experienced. So we can help HR. We can jump in with people in marketing. I mean, I think it was Kevin in our group. He and I had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and we talked about the 4 pillars of a go-to-market strategy: marketing, sales, product management, and customer success.
Yes.
And I think sales can arguably jump in any of those spaces. But with marketing, I mean, really, we need to, it's important that salespeople and marketing dovetail together and make sure that the messages that are being constructed
Yeah.
can be interpreted and spoken in a clear fashion, right?
It's
And
it's a symbiotic relationship
it
between
really is.
sales and marketing, and a lot of the time that gets missed in organizations. It's a mystery to me why.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, and I've seen that too. I've seen that where there's been, those have been big misses between those two groups, and it shouldn't be. But I've inevitably learned from the marketing folks, and they and hopefully I give them insight as well that helps. So that's another group, and then the last group that comes into my thought is the financial folks. You know, um, Helping them interpret the sales cycle for different types of technology and products. What does it look like? Are we going to close in 2 months, or is this a 12-month sale? Is this is this a technical push or a market pull? Like, what's going on here? What is the dynamic behind actually selling this product? And what is the buy side dynamic that we need to actually think about if we are projecting sales, or if we are working with marketing to price things out and looking at, what the revenue track is for 12, 24 months, 5 years. So a salesperson brings, because we are interfacing so closely with a client, I feel that we bring a lot of insight and a lot of information back to these functional areas to, help validate and inform their decisions, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? So
So how do you
there's a,
how do you
yeah,
feel about formalized sales training programs? Because like, people development is really all about and success. A lot of that is dependent upon training.
yeah,
So, there's on-the-job training that's sort of informal, but what about the formal stuff?
it
I think
really,
salespeople tend to be more uh, um, sort of accepting of formal training.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, okay, so I'll take a step back here. So when I think about formalized sales training programs, first of all, there's a whole host of them out there, right? And everybody is, there's a host of people that have developed these things, but they're all kind of variations on the same theme, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I think that formalized sales training programs are important because it does give a structure and a framework for somebody to follow. And that is something that is important regardless of whose program it is. Is it Spin? Is it Challenger? Is it Acumen? Any of these companies, they generally have got a program that is zeroing in on identifying problems and assessing needs and active listening and asking the right questions, all of those things. The problem that we get into with formalized sales training programs that I have seen is that we send people away to these programs. They go to it for 3 days. They have the great continental breakfast and the Starbucks coffee. And then they come back and there's no follow through,
Yeah.
right? And the problem with formalized sales training programs is that, like any type of learning, you have to pick up and apply that immediately or else you lose it. And you have
Yes.
to have somebody that's a sponsor or an advocate within the organization to make sure it happens. So formalized sales training programs are great if a few caveats are met. A, that there's an advocate is going to take responsibility for the people when they come home from whatever nice place they've been sent to, right?
Yes.
And checking in on goals and having some sort of a feedback loop regarding how they're doing.
Yeah.
And then secondly, making sure that, you know, that there's a debrief conversation that occurs immediately and that people jump into these types of things, these types of behaviors today, not next week, not next month, or else you just flush several $1,000s down the toilet because people forget as the calendar marches on.
Yes, that's right.
So there's the good and bad. I
Yeah.
think that there's a place for them, but they have to be executed properly in the organization.
Yeah. And I think a lot of things like that don't get executed properly in organizations. From my experience, um, um, whether it's trainings or conventions and things like that, people go, they have a great time. The company spends thousands of dollars. Everybody comes back and they go right back into the same old slump that they've been in,
Yeah.
and they never grow and they never develop, and nobody asks or holds anyone accountable for anything. So you've got 20,000 leads from a convention and they're all sitting in a box.
Yeah.
Or you do a training, as you said, for 2-3 days in a sexy location, and everyone's had a great time, and God knows what the hell happened after hours, but that was it.
Not me.
They might remember one or two things, but there's nobody making sure they're hitting their objectives and that they're using the new the new system or whatever, right? There's no real accountability.
No, and I mean, I think one of the antidotes to that as well, Renee,
Mhm.
is that if you're going to commit some serious financial resources to send somebody off to training, is that you have to have sort of a pre-mortem, if that makes sense, not a post-mortem.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
pre-mortem is about, this is why we're sending you. This is what we need you to get out of this. This is what we're going to ask you when you come back. Like, and I think what
Yeah.
you have to do at that point is provide people with the expectations and context as to why they're doing this. And it's and making it, I think, couching it in positive terms. It's about your development. We want you to get better at what you do because ultimately you're better at your job, you're more satisfied, but it also drives revenue for us and we're a more successful company. So I think that's the other thing. And I remember that in my past experiences, I would be told, you're going to Chicago for a sales training. good luck and God bless. Here's your airline ticket. And like, okay, that's super. And it was like, what's behind door number two? You get there and then you finally get into the content. They may have sent you some pre-reading, they may have not. But I think the management or the leadership within an organization has to take a responsibility for that up front to get the most out of it.
Yes, absolutely. Having been in training and development in a previous life, um, I, I could tell you, I used to do leadership training, and I differentiated myself by offering follow-up sessions after. So we'd have a full day, and because I was external, I wasn't working within a company in the training department. So I was self-employed, as I still am. And I would go into a company, I would do the training, and then I would follow up with several web sessions. At that time, it was GoToMeeting was the big thing, and I would do them that way, and so that there was some kind of continuity. But being an external provider, I didn't have a relationship with the sales team, it's not the sales team, with the different leadership teams. So it was management. I was training all the managers in multiple departments, and there wasn't really, I didn't have that same kind of thing. Whereas when you work in the company, so as a fractional, for example, as a fractional sales leader, if you're training your people, you're there to hold them accountable too. And so there's no, you know what I mean? And I think that personally, that stuff is best done in-house by people who know how,
Yeah.
and who have the authority to set the objectives and the expectations and the follow-up and all of that. So I think it's a good add-on to a fractional business if there's a training component as well. If that's something that you have the ability to do, then it's a good thing to have in your pocket.
Yeah, and just to build on what you said, I agree, and that is the fractional sales leader in this situation has been given a mandate, right? They've been given a mandate. They're not a third party provider that's going to arrive and be there for a week or 2 weeks, and sometimes gets viewed askew by the folks in the organization. But a fractional sales leader or a fractional leader in any business function is hopefully got a mandate from somebody in the CXO to get a job done. And that
Yes.
advocacy is really critical to success. And it's really critical that they communicate to the team. This is why this person's coming in for 6 months or a year or 3 months, and this is what they're achieving, and we expect your cooperation. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. I'm not trying to
Yes.
say or else,
No.
but it's critical, but it's critical that that happens, right? Because
Yeah.
if the fractional leader is given that type of a mandate and that type of support, they're probably going to be successful because somebody's batting for them at a high level.
Yes, that's right. Deepa, are you available? I think she took a little break.
That's all right.
Oh,
Hi,
No,
there
I'm
Deepa.
she is. Hi, Deepa. Do you have any questions for Dan?
no, I'm just really just here to listen because I'm new to
Okay.
the fractional space, and so I work with like go-to-market operations and like strategy and stuff. So I was like, who better to learn from than a fractional sales leader? So
Yeah,
here
good,
to
good,
listen.
good idea. So what's your number one pet peeve, Dan, about sales professionals in general? Before, this is our closing question, everybody.
Closing question. Well, how much time do we have? Um, it's hard to narrow it to one, to be quite honest, but one of the number one pet peeve for me when I worked with other people, and you observe people and their behaviors, and you observe their behaviors, but then you also observe what their behavior does to the person they're speaking with, and you observe how the receiver of that behavior is reacting. One of the biggest pet peeves for me is salespeople that do what I call the show up and throw up.
Hmm.
They walk through the door and they have an agenda, and they're going to share this information with you, whether you like it or not. And it's a very linear conversation that doesn't really take into account the questions, the needs, the problems of the client. And I've seen this so many times, and it happens a lot with younger salespeople because they're nervous, right? But it also happens with tenured salespeople because it's habit. you know, and those are the ones that are really unforgiving. If you've been doing this for a couple of decades, then you shouldn't be doing the show up and throw up, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really disrespectful to your client, frankly. You're not honoring that business partner. You're not demonstrating that you actually have placed a dollar sign on their time, and time's a limited resource. So that's the big pet peeve for me, is the show up and throw up, which has some subcategories there. There's the people that they've prepared inadequately. They haven't done their homework. They haven't asked the questions. So they just rely on that canned linear sort of approach. They haven't taken the time to develop, good questions and really try to engage in active listening and actually hear the person that they're speaking with. So that's really my number one pet peeve when I've observed colleagues and people that have reported to me over the years. And I mean, that can be changed. And that can be changed.
Yeah.
It's important to recognize just the diversity of these people that you're walking in the door and taking that into account. And really, the small to mid-sized businesses often have a sales strategy that is accidental rather than deliberate.
Yes.
And I think that as a fractional sales leader, one of the biggest gifts that we can give is we can hone those listening skills and ask the right questions and get to the heart of a problem and turn their process into something that is deliberate and meaningful and has some sort of a cadence and structure to it that's going to make them successful.
Yeah. Asking questions and selling a solution is so much more effective. I mean, we used to say, and someone used to say, well, I in an organization I worked with a long time ago, and maybe you've heard this before, but telling ain't selling, asking is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to ask questions. If you want to sell somebody, ask questions, find out what they need, because you can sell a product. You might go into a company and sell whatever, but you have not only barely scratched the surface of what's possible in terms of sales and revenue if you don't ask questions.
Can I just share one last anecdote with you that's important, and it's
Absolutely.
very relevant. And so,
Okay.
yeah, if you don't ask the right questions, you are scratching this. You're not just digging deep. You're scratching the surface, and sometimes you don't understand the scale of the problem you're entering. And I worked for a company that was highly successful, had a great product. They brought me in to fine tune their sales function. I had a meeting with their director of one of their divisions. It was cardiology, I think, actually. And I asked him I had a question about how they interact with the professional community, particularly in trade shows. It was a simple question, but it gave me so much insight into how they worked and what their psychology was. He said, well, we go to this meeting. I said, a meeting? He said, yes, a meeting. We go to this meeting. I take the earliest flight out of Toronto to Chicago I can, about 8 o'clock. I walk around the trade show floor booth to the booths. I talk to my customers, and I'm out of there by 1 p.m. And I'm back and I have supper in Toronto. And I said, and I realized by asking that type of question, just the scale of magnitude of the issue that was occurring. And I think when you ask those types of questions, it really helps you avoid surprises.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time and your insight today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
And anyway, thank you for everything. And that's it for today. If anyone is interested in joining the Fractional Referral Network, there will be a link in the YouTube link. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.